2, 1.
Thank you, Susan. The candidates will now present their opening statements. They have 2 minutes, and Shiva Mosanzade will go first.
Good evening. Thank you for the League of Women Voters for putting this together and for Supervisor Brickman for participating. As was mentioned, my name is Shiva Mosanzade. To give you a little background about who I am, I came to the U.S., left my parents, came to the U.S. from Iran when I was 15 years old. I now live in Glenview. I've been living in Glenview for the past 10 years with my husband and 2 boys and our new puppy. I'm a corporate and securities attorney by training, but for the past 12 years, I've been in public service, serving the residents of Northfield Township and the neighboring communities as Chief of Staff to State Senator Laura Fine. So I'm very familiar with the needs of our community. I've also seen what other communities in our area are doing. Township government is tasked with as a social safety net for the community. And unfortunately, what I've seen compared to other townships is that our current leadership in Northfield Township is failing our residents. It's not simply enough to give people, hand people a bag of food. With the pandemic, the needs are greater than ever, and other townships are providing rent, utility, and mortgage services. Our current township government is out of touch, sleepy, and operates in a vacuum. I've been knocking on doors and talking to residents, many of whom aren't even aware of what township government does and what services they provide and what services they can access and demand from the township. The township is currently sitting on $5.7 million in reserves, while our residents and social service organizations are in desperate need of help. This is fiscal irresponsibility. We desperately need new leadership. As supervisor, I plan on modernizing the township and how we communicate with our residents, innovate our service delivery systems, and bring many more services to township residents, such as free legal aid, disability and senior counseling and advocacy, and all of this without raising taxes. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Ms. Brickman.
Thank you. Thanks to the League of Women Voters for providing this forum for a productive discussion of issues. In my time with the township, starting with the Human Services Review Commission, my goal has always been to care for our residents, whether through the food pantry, financial assistance programs, working to keep our tax levy low, or helping people connect with other agencies for direct services. Everything has to be done within legal constraints, such as Dillon's rule, which limits municipal governments such as townships to what is mentioned in statute and restrictions on transfers between funds. Because it's privately supported, the food pantry has more flexibility. During the pandemic, we've had a roughly 50% increase in demand to over 950 households, but we've also increased the amount being distributed to each household several times. We've had directed donations to the pantry's Angel Fund, which helps people in crisis who cannot access other forms of financial assistance. With tax dollars, we've increased our support to the very effective agencies serving our residents, providing critical services, such as Jocelyn Center, Family Service Center, Youth Services, and many others. I'm passionate about those collaborations. We've been careful to balance that with avoiding increasing the real estate tax burden on property owners as we've reduced our tax levy for 7 years while enhancing our services. There can be a temptation to simply increase funding, but we're aware of the affordable housing crunch in our communities. We see people forced to move away because of rising taxes. We recognize our responsibility to avoid adding to those money pressures. A belief in the importance of a diverse community that allows people an entree who'd like to move here leads us to be mindful of doing our part to make this area truly welcoming to everyone. I'm a lifelong Glenview resident, 3rd generation, and I care deeply about this community.
Thank you. And Ms. Brickman, you will go first with the first question. Some have suggested, particularly in urban and suburban areas, there's little need for township government, and that in municipal or county government should absorb or could absorb many of the township's functions as a way to save taxpayer money. What do you see as the value of Northfield Township government for its residents? In other words, should it exist?
I think it's a good discussion to have. I think that there certainly will be changes in townships, especially in suburban areas. It is different downstate where there aren't overlapping municipalities. But I would say that people who don't need the services that are uniquely offered by townships are very blessed. If they haven't needed that financial assistance that townships provide, or some of the other services that help people in crisis, they're lucky. It would be very difficult in a county like ours to ask someone who is experiencing a family crisis to go to Cook County for their help. It's hard to navigate a bureaucracy in an area of millions and millions of people. The township is able to provide that direct help when people need it. Similarly, I think it's certainly my own experience contacting the assessor's office has been much easier at the township, and that's before I was at the township, than it was dealing directly with the county. So I think that while there should be discussion, it's not an easy answer. I also served on the steering committee for CMAP's study of unincorporated Northfield and Main townships, and there are no easy answers.
Thank you. Ms. Mohsenzadeh. You're muted.
As I said, I worked in state government for 12 years, and this is certainly a question that comes up often. And it requires a nuanced answer because it's not a one size fits all. There are many parts of Illinois where township government is the only form of government. Township government is the oldest form of government, and it may be the only government accessible for miles for people. And there are other parts, such as in Evanston, for example, where Evanston Township was coterminous with the city of Evanston, and therefore there was a complete overlap, and the city was able to easily take over those services that the township was providing, and they were able to eliminate the township with, obviously, with the taxpayer support and with the Illinois General Assembly allowing the mechanism for them to do that. Other townships have done the same if they were coterminous, or if the municipalities that surrounded them were able to absorb the township and provide those services. In Northfield Township, we have a large population who live in unincorporated areas, and compared to other Cook County townships, and they need our services, and we have to find a way to provide those services. If not through township government, then through other methods. I support the league's position on this, that ultimately we want to consolidate if it provides efficiency of services and government sharing of services. But again, that doesn't apply in every instance. So unless the municipalities are able to step in and take over those services, we can't have that happening in township government. And so ultimately up to the taxpayers.
Thank you. Ms. Brickman, no, I'm sorry, Ms. Mohsenzadeh, you will be first with the next question. Do you see any way to streamline the services offered by the township to reduce costs to the taxpayers?
Actually, no. And the reason for that is that we, as I had mentioned before, we are sitting on a huge rainy day fund or reserves that we should be spending right now, because if it's not rainy day now, I don't know when is. A 100-year pandemic, it's a tsunami, and residents need help. We have a lot of residents that are struggling paying their mortgage, their utilities, their rent, and we need to access those funds to provide for them. I know other townships, for example, have created a special COVID fund to be able to provide their residents with relief. And we haven't done anything like that in Northfield Township. So while I'm fully supportive of fiscal responsibility, I believe it's fiscally irresponsible to sit on taxpayer money in a bank account instead of using it to serve taxpayers.
Thank you. Ms. Brickman.
Yes, thank you. We run a very lean operation. I think that people looking at our spending, as Trustee Mohsenzadeh has been doing for 4 years, don't find a lot of room for reduction in what we're spending. Unfortunately, a good chunk of reserve on which we're sitting is in our general assistance fund, which cannot be transferred to our general fund. So we do have some limitations. General assistance funds, as I talked about in my opening statement, have some limitations on how they can be spent. So that's a challenge for us. It's something we've been trying to spend down for some years. That fund originally had to be very large because there wasn't insurance available for if there was a major medical crisis for a general assistance client, such as needing a heart transplant or something like that. So much larger reserves were needed. We are now able to carry insurance that will cover us in that kind of an instance. But again, the reserves were built up previously when that wasn't available. So as far as the spending, no, I think we've done a great job of bringing our spending way down, including negotiating for the purchase of the space that we're in now. When we moved 5 or 6 years ago, we were able to reduce expenses while getting much better space and additional space and a much better location for our clients, many of our clients, particularly being literally a walk across the street to Jewel. So
Thank you. And Ms. Brickman, you will be first with the next question. How has the pandemic affected the role of the township and its ability to provide the services it offers in normal circumstances? Do you anticipate any additional expenses or investments necessary to protect employees and taxpayers who visit the township offices to conduct business?
that's a great question. I don't anticipate that. We've been very fortunate in that we are essential workers. We've been open every scheduled day since the pandemic began. Our staff have been heroes in coming in and getting the work done. And we expect next week, I'm saying this with my fingers crossed, that our final employee will begin the vaccination process. We're considered 1B, and so we have stayed safe, we've operated safely. We've been able to continue offering services virtually over the telephone, even stepping outside as necessary to transfer documents, that kind of thing. And we hope, well, we expect that that will continue. With the employees protected, we will be able to open up on a limited basis, but we'll be doing that in consultation with the employees. We need everyone to be safe and to feel safe. And we always want to keep our residents safe, anyone who visits, who's coming in to access services. So that's my answer.
Thank you, Ms. Mohsenzadeh.
I apologize. Your voice went out at the first when you were stating the first part of the question. Just the first part.
How has the pandemic affected the role of the township and its ability to provide the services it offers under normal circumstances? And do you anticipate any additional expenses or investments necessary to protect employees and taxpayers who visit?
Thank you for repeating the question. Well, I appreciate everything that Supervisor Brickman and the employees of the township have done to continue providing services. I'm aware that some of the other townships have been open, fully operational for a long time, and they've been able to provide services directly to constituents by appointments only, while still protecting the safety of taxpayers and residents and the employees. I don't see that we have had an increase in costs, maybe marginally, just to provide more safety precautions for everyone involved. I believe that the township reached out to a village government and asked for them to pay for a truck to help the food pantry, which that's an increased cost that I would have thought the township could have provided for itself, instead of asking a village government that's already burdened with providing for residents and for helping out businesses to help a township that has enough funds to care for its own needs. So that's an increased cost that we would not have had otherwise because of COVID.
Thank you. And you will be first with the next question. Has the pandemic revealed a permanent need for new services or the ability to do away with any services?
That's a very good question. One thing we've seen is with the pandemic is disparities in access to healthcare, especially, and also assistance for our seniors who may be technically challenged. And that is something that, if I'm elected as supervisor, I would really look deeply into. Is researching and providing. We have a lot of senior citizens who are not able to log on to internet, sit there for hours to try to find a vaccine. Well, that is something, as as a township government, we're tasked with helping out seniors, and that's a service that I would like to see us provide in the township. Just anything that requires technology, provide that assistance to seniors, and also expand on dial a ride program and just advertise that more. There are many senior residents who are not aware of that. I mean, so many residents have been contacting the senior services in Glenview and in Northbrook and don't even think to contact the township to help them provide those services. That's definitely, access to healthcare is definitely something that I would look into providing through township.
Thank you. And the same question for you, Ms. Brickman.
Thank you. I'll respond somewhat to what I just heard. We have been connecting our residents with a group of local people who are assisting them in getting appointments for vaccines. They've done a fantastic job, and they can be contacted by telephone if the senior doesn't use email. And I actually heard from someone just last night who had contacted them yesterday morning and heard back already last night and was thrilled with the help she was getting. We've been using that group. They haven't been fully utilized, and they've been anxious to help more people. As far as seniors and healthcare, we do provide funding to access to care. The county services aren't what we'd like them to be, but we do have a clinic in Arlington Heights that our residents are able to use. And with seniors, I'm a very active member of the Northbrook Senior Roundtable. The Director of Senior Services for the Village of Glenview and I co-chair the Glenview Values Project. Again, we collaborate closely with these groups. Just last week, I was part of a workshop at the North Shore Senior Center, to which we provide funding on equity and inclusion, and so we do work toward that.
Thank you. And you are first with the next question. Township supervisor is a part-time position, yet the nature of the job's responsibilities do not necessarily lend itself to a set amount of dedicated time to get the job done. How are you prepared to accommodate any unforeseen commitment required of the job relative to your other current commitments?
Well, I think that it's unlikely that it will need more time than what I've been giving it, particularly since the pandemic began. I've been doing this job full time for quite some time. That isn't a statutory requirement, but it is a choice that I've made. When I left the business world, it was so that I could commit myself to public service, and this was the way that I've chosen to do that. So since the pandemic began, it's certainly been a more than full-time job. We've had plenty of work to do, and it's not at all unusual to have a 55-hour week, which is a choice. But this is something that I really care about, and that I'm passionate about, that I am willing to make the time for it.
Thank you. Ms. Mohsenzadeh.
Well, I currently work full-time, and as I said, I work for state as Chief of Staff to Senator Laura Fine, and I put in more than full-time hours there, if you can imagine, with unemployment issues and everything else that's been happening with the pandemic. In addition to that, I serve on the PTA Council. I chaired Glenview Education Foundation. I am active with other organizations in the area. I've done several leadership training programs, and I'm a mother of two very active boys, as I mentioned, 10 and 12 years old. So as they said, if you want something done, ask a busy person. I have managed to do all of that, and I'm sure I will manage to be a supervisor and work full time as a supervisor with no issues. And I'm willing and ready to commit.
Thank you. And the next question will go to you first. For 10 months ending January 31st, the food pantry has $1.17 million more revenue than expenses, which is more than 2 years of a typical year's annual budgeted revenue. How do you foresee using that excess revenue?
And I am so thankful to the residents of Northfield Township for opening their hearts and their wallets and for being so generous with the food pantry. I'm really, truly grateful. One thing I would like to do as a supervisor is to really do a proper analysis of what the needs of pantry residents or pantry clients are, and make sure that that gets communicated to the community. That way we receive what we need. And for example, gift cards are great. It gives people a lot of choice. Having funds that give us flexibility, having cash funds that give us flexibility to help out, again, with unforeseen expenses, be it healthcare, be it utilities or rent, all the other things that come up that people don't expect. That would be very helpful. And I have to look into what these funds, if they're in cash, in which case we definitely have the need and we can spend it, spend what we need and save what we can't for other times. If they're just in terms of food, then we need to see if there are other communities that we can collaborate with and have exchange programs with what we have, so that we all are utilizing everything we have and not wasting it.
Thank you. Ms. Brickman.
Yes, this is something that we talk about frequently, figuring out how to be good stewards of the money which is donated to get out to people. So earlier this week, we had a meeting about increasing our gift card distribution to our clients. We are constantly looking for new ways to source food. That has been a challenge. It has eased somewhat in that we're finding more sources for it. It was difficult earlier in the pandemic when household-sized items were difficult, but we are finding ways to do that. We're working hard to make sure that that goes out the door and gets into the hands of the people who need it, either in the form of food or in the form of other assistance. I mentioned that we have an angel fund now that has been in place for a couple of years, but has recently received some very substantial donations. And that's helped several people. It helped one man ineligible for other kinds of assistance get the insulin that he desperately needed. It helped the new widow who I talked about earlier, who had rent due the same week that her husband died. So we're always looking for ways to apply that in the most useful fashion, honoring the wishes of our donors.
Thank you. And Ms. Brickman, you will be first with the next question. And this one will be the last question. What do you see as the top 3 priorities for the township in the coming term? And what challenges will affect the township's ability to execute them?
Well, I will say that one of the challenges that we always have in township government is Dillon's rule, which I talked about earlier, which does limit what a township does. We have that limitation of only things that are called for in statute specifically. So that ties our hands somewhat. That said, I think that certainly our direct financial assistance, many people aren't aware of the fact that in addition to emergency financial assistance, which helps people with rent and that type of thing, We have general assistance that will help single people without dependents on an ongoing basis, typically as they're waiting for Social Security disability income. So that continues to be a big priority. Finding new ways to help them with other housing expenses. We have a partnership with CETA, and we're able to help that way. But we will continue to work with CETA to try to find new assistance for our clients. And food, that remains our #1 priority. We say that hunger is unacceptable in our community, and we truly believe that.
Thank you. Ms. Mosanzade.
So as far as challenges go, Ms. Brickman mentioned Dillon's rule. Yet, as I said, I see other townships who continue to provide services. For example, we provide 21 cents on the dollar from our budget for services, whereas we've got New Trier providing 84 cents, Maine providing 52 cents. So other townships find a way to provide the services without kind of wringing their hands and say, oops, we can't because Dillon's rule or other limitations. And one thing I would really like to do is do something that hasn't been done in the township for a long time, which is do a survey of need, do an assessment of need, have a data-driven approach to what we need in the township and how we can address it. We need to have a strategic plan against something that hasn't been done in years. A strategic plan to see where the township should go moving forward. The needs of our township have changed. Just give you an example, District 34 has gone from about 15% free and reduced lunch to 25% free and reduced lunch. Well, what are we doing in the township to address those changing needs? Nothing. So these are the challenges that we have, and we really need to address them. And we need to give a lot more money to our social service providers. Again, compared to other townships, Niles Township gives nearly $2 million. We give $200,000. It's just, we're not serving our residents.
Thank you. Thank you. It is time now for closing statements. And Ms. Brickman will go first. You have 90 seconds.
Well, thank you again to the League of Women Voters and to Trustee Mohsenzadeh for participating. And thanks to the League, not just for hosting, but for what you do to encourage active participation in this whole process. I really do care about this community. I think about a man who was just in our office within the last couple of weeks, coming in to make sure that he's getting a tax exemption that he needs. He's preparing to sell the only home he's ever known because he can't afford to stay there because of his real estate tax burden. A volunteer who contacted us and started with us because she needed to have a way to reach out to help people after losing her husband. And she has told us repeatedly that it saves her life being able to come in and help people and see the good work that's being done there. We have lots of stories like that. We continue to unite people through community partnerships. I'm really proud of what we're doing and of the staff that we have. We serve people with dignity and with compassion. That was recognized by the Glenview Chamber of Commerce and are being named one of their businesses of the year. So I thank everyone for the privilege of holding this position, and I ask for your continued support.
Thank you. Ms. Mosanzade.
Thank you, the League, for the opportunity to answer questions, and for Supervisor Brickman again for participating. I too have my stories, as I was so saddened recently to hear about a mother of 3 getting evicted despite eviction moratorium from her home. I mean, these are children who attend school with my children, getting evicted because she couldn't pay her rent. And there are people and bad acting landlords who get around that. And these are the sort of things that I'd like to change. You've heard Supervisor Brickman, we do differ on how we approach this role. She has been in office for 20 years, and I believe, with all due respect, that it's time for new leadership, someone who will have a different vision for the role and will think about delivering services in a different way. I like to get community's input put a strategic plan in place. I'm running with a superb group of candidates, and I would like to use their talents and have more of a collaborative leadership style, working with other units of government to serve our taxpayers. I believe in going above and beyond to deliver the highest quality service to every resident in the township in incorporated and unincorporated areas, with an emphasis on efficiency, integrity, transparency, and fiscal responsibility, and without raising taxes, because we have the money to do it and we do not need to raise any taxes. Thank you.
And thank you, candidates. This concludes our forum. And thank you to the League of Women Voters of Glenview-Glencoe. And don't forget to vote April 6th. Happy voting, everyone.
Thank you.